CBS sportscaster Brent Musburger will be making his final appearance for the network in the NCAA final after being fired on Sunday. According to CBS Sports executive producer Ted Shaker, the network wanted Musburger to cut back his workload. Musburger, who had been with the network since 1975, was told Sunday that his contract, worth nearly $2 million a year, would not be renewed after tonight's game.
He had envisioned a certain role for him in the future, and he, I think, had a different idea of what that role would be.
I think we all understand the kind of business that we're in, just like athletes understand the kind of profession that they're in. And I guess nothing really surprises you.
We left off with a mention that the national championship game between Duke and UNLV was nearly overshadowed by a CBS personnel shakeup. That shakeup involved the man assigned to call that game alongside Billy Packer, Brent Musburger, who was abruptly fired early on the morning of April 1st, causing Musburger and many others, when the news hit the wires, to assume this to be a strange April Fool's prank. The apparent reasoning for the firing owed largely to a power shift in CBS management at the beginning of the year, combined with other factors, such as Musburger being perhaps the most overexposed and overextended sportscaster since Kurt Gowdy, most famously as host of the NFL Today pregame show for 15 years, while also hosting CBS NBA Finals coverage, for which he had been the lead play-by-play broadcaster from 1974 to 80, was the lead announcer for CBS College Basketball, until 1989 the lead voice of college football for CBS, and was scheduled to become the lead play-by-play man for CBS's newly acquired Major League Baseball coverage. In addition, there were also frequent behind-the-scenes clashes, particularly with former CBS Sports executive producer Terry O'Neill, by this time working for NBC, described him as a, quote, anchor monster, unquote, in his 1989 book, The Game Behind the Game, with other clashes including with CBS's lead NFL crew of Pat Summerall and John Madden, and Madden's predecessor as lead NFL analyst Tom Brookshire, former NFL Today colleague Jimmy the Greek Snyder, who once got into a fight with Musburger in 1980, and especially fighting with CBS Sports president Neil Pilson and executive producer Ted Shaker, the last people you want to be fighting with while you're seeking contract extension. Brent's contract expired that summer, and he was rumored to be wanting at least $10 million a year, which would not only be 5 times what Brent, already the highest paid sportscaster on TV, was making from his 1985 contract, but will be second only to CBS Evening News anchor Dan Rather as the highest paid on-air personality on CBS altogether. Back to the game, with Musburger's deposing suddenly hogging the headlines, CBS decided to let Brent call the national championship game anyway, though there was enough fear that Musburger would try to sneak in a few parting shots at the Tiffany network that color commentator Billy Packer had orders to take over and call the game solo if that happened. To Brent's credit, he decided to take the high road, though as things happened, the game itself was a rout, with UNLV led by 29 points from shooting guard Anderson Hunt, trampling the Blue Devils 103-73. Rather appropriate that 30-point blowout marked Brent Musburger's lame duck game for CBS.
This is a night that belonged to the running Rebels, and that's the way it should be. But as you know, this was my last assignment for CBS. After 22 years with the television network, radio network, and the stations, and I have had an opportunity to work with some of the greatest directors, producers, technicians in the world, not to mention analysts like my good friend Billy Packer. Billy, we have shared some great memories.
Well, we saw a great champion here tonight. It's been an honor for all of us to work with a great champion of broadcasting.
Billy, thank you, man. Folks, I've had the best seat in the house. Thanks for sharing it. I'll see you down the road. Now let's send you to Jim Nance.
Brent, I just want to add, thanks for tonight. Thanks for everything. We're all going to miss you, and we certainly wish you the best.
One positive for CBS was that its March Madness coverage won a Sports Emmy Award for Outstanding Live Sports Series, the second such award in 3 years after 1988, with this marking the first of a three-peat in that category through 1992. Finally, before we move on, we'll backtrack a day to April 1st, where CBS carried the NCAA Women's College Basketball Championship game held at Thompson-Boling Arena in Knoxville, where the Pac-10 champion and Western Region top seed Stanford Cardinal team, led by most outstanding player and senior point guard Jennifer Azee, ensured that for their opponent, two-time national championship runner-up Auburn Tigers, the third time would not be the charm as Stanford defeated Auburn 76-60, with Tim Brandt and Mimi Griffin calling the action for CBS.
Room of yours, David?
Yeah.
I looked at how much you were paying me this time, man.
Yeah, I know. Well, I appreciate you coming in. I assumed after this was announced, first of all, when you came out here, I said congratulations.
Yeah.
It's because of all of the surrounding press and all of the attention. It's almost like you've won something, and I'm just thinking, oh, yeah, nice going. Way to go. You lost your job.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
I'm out on the streets, unemployed, and got all that free publicity.
Now, you know, when I heard about this, and first of all, I thought the timing couldn't have been stranger.
Well, strange. It was horrible.
Well, they were, where I live, they were using it as to promote the news coming up, little 10-second things all during the day. Brent Musburger gets fired, and I'm thinking, first of all, could it have been one of those Andy Rooney deals? Did he say something dumb? Did they suspend him? Did they fire him? Did he beat somebody up? And I said, no, probably not. And then I'm thinking, they're out there in Denver. CBS has got all of the sports executives out there. There's parties and stuff. Maybe he had a couple of drinks and was hitting on somebody's wife. But, you know, it was so strange because I'm thinking, what could he have done not to be re-signed? It was very hard to imagine.
We still don't know. But let me tell you an anecdote of how it ended.
Okay.
22 years at CBS, like you pointed out. And here it is at 2:30 in the morning. My brother,
Todd,
Attorney Todd, called out to an elevator bank, 19th floor of the Hyatt Hotel in Denver, and he is told that it's over. That's it. And Neil Pilson, the president of CBS Sports, says to Todd, Todd, perhaps we should issue a joint statement that the two sides have broken down here and just going to go on. No, wait, Todd says. That's not what happened. You issue the statement. Yeah. So Neil says, well, Todd, what would you like me to say?
Oh, we have a picture. Is that the guy right there?
That's the guy right there. That's the one who said it. So, man. That's the man right there. You know, that's right. So,
they're just up the street. We can go find the guy.
Yeah. Hey. So my brother says, Neil, just tell the truth for once if you can. Yeah. So then, instead of waiting, you know, like they should have died for the championship game, it was horrible, David, to make that announcement. I felt badly for the players. I felt badly for the teams. I felt badly for everybody concerned with the Final Four because suddenly
I mean, that whole tournament had plenty of drama in and of itself. It had enough side stories, enough interest, enough really kind of heart-tugging scenarios. You didn't need this.
You got that right. I didn't need it either.
Yeah. Did you have, how long have these contract negotiations been going on?
Oh, for about a year and very easily. In fact, my brother said this is the easiest negotiating I've ever had. You know, we suspect, in fact, we're convinced that it was a charade all along.
For a full year, they're leading you along?
They're going to take me as deep as they can and get rid of me.
But why? To what advantage?
We don't know, other than perhaps they were not satisfied with my ability as a baseball announcer, which had never yet been tested under fire. That's the only thing we
but if they, okay, say for a second that is the case, wouldn't they just tell you that a year ago when they're trying to get the contract?
I'd like to think that after 22 years with any employer that, yes, they would call you in and they'd say, Brent, we're not satisfied with you as a baseball announcer. Let's make another kind of deal. Never happened. Never a breakdown of any kind. It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope nobody gets fired the way I did, man. 2:30.
But that's broadcasting. That's the way it always happens. Something silly like that.
I've never been fired.
Yeah.
From anything.
Now the other thing I thought maybe was the problem was your brother Todd. Is he a real lawyer?
Yeah, oh yeah.
You know, or is he just carrying the bags?
You know, David, how do you fire your agent when he's your brother?
Yeah.
You know what? You know how trapped I am? I gotta keep the guy.
So then last night. Now, by the way, I thought you did a great job of handling it. The Final Four weekend, and especially during the final game and at the end of the final game and so forth. And then last night you go on the show with Sam Donaldson and Diane Sawyer. and you started naming names and so on and so forth. So you must have really been kind of burning inside about this.
Yeah, and I would not have named names or said anything at all, David, until suddenly the newspapers from around the country came in and all these anonymous quotes attributed to CBS executives that I'd been horrible to work with, that crews didn't like me, that I had producers fired, that I was an anchor monster. That's not true.
Yeah.
I mean, it just never went on. And these guys had to have a campaign to justify what they did.
Yeah.
All they had to do to Larry Tisch is justify we're saving, a couple $1 million. I mean, that's all Larry, he signs off on it in a minute. But, the rest of the people, what's going on? So they got to portray you as a bad guy.
Yeah.
That's when I got emotional, and that's when I reacted.
Well, I think you're entitled to those emotions after nearly a quarter of a century.
It was very honest on my part. I mean, people probably don't get to see that side of me, but I was angry, and I lashed back.
Now, let me ask you one other thing. This is just a question in theory. CBS, it seems to me like this couldn't have come at a worse time for them because they're not exactly on top of the broadcasting world.
No, as you may have noticed.
So to let one of their bona fide blue-chip guys go, that seems like a mistake.
I called Tisch after I'd been axed on Monday.
I called him too.
Did you get? I got through. He picked up the phone and I said,
sent him a tape.
And I said, Larry, I want to tell you about the deception. I went through part of it. And then I said, one of the things about this that strikes me is that this network can't get anything right. And he says, tell me about it. There's a guy admitting it.
Yeah.
They're just...
It's interesting that the people... Well, I won't get into this, but there's a really different attitude and personality and ego structure of the people who are in front of cameras and the people who are in front of desks.
Well, the ones at the desk, I think, some of them, not all of them, resent talent and what they can do and how much they earn and how easy they make it look as a livelihood.
Well, say it.
I mean,
Brent.
a lot of NBC guys...
They're weenies. But admit it. They're weenies.
Absolutely. And worse.
And boneheads.
Bozos. Where are those clowns that work with me?
But also, another point, aren't you surprised that it became this big a story?
Well, yeah, but they did it. They did it. Nobody in their right mind announces a firing on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Anybody knows anything about
news? It was odd,
news?
especially the day of the big...
because first of all, there was no big sporting event until the next day, so I didn't have that to compete with for the headlines. Secondly, around the country, you worked at news, what is it, Indianapolis, you were the local news outlet, did the weather, right?
Yeah,
okay.
That's right.
So that there's a limited number of crews on Sunday. Right. So they read the wire, they rip the wire, oh, here's this guy got fired. Man, this is a big story.
All right,
they went with it.
Let's do a commercial and we'll find out what things your life is going to have for you now. On April 6th, shortly after Musburger was interviewed by Sam Donaldson on ABC's Primetime Live, where he accused Pilson and Shaker of having a, quote, personal vendetta, unquote, called the negotiations a sham, and accused the two of deciding he was, quote, too big for my britches and uncontrollable, unquote, CBS promoted Jack Buck, who had been listed as the number 2 voice for baseball, as well as working primarily as the lead voice of CBS radio NFL coverage, to the top spot alongside ABC expatriate Tim McCarver, while replacing Buck on the B crew alongside Jim Cott would be Dick Stockton, lead voice of CBS's soon-to-depart NBA coverage. However, there were briefly rumors that either Vin Scully, the lead voice for NBC's baseball coverage from 1983 to 89, Bob Costas, the number 2 voice of NBC's baseball coverage from 84 to 89, as well as the former counterpart to Musburger as host of NBC's NFL Live pregame show, or Al Michaels, lead voice of ABC's baseball coverage from 83 to 89, as well as the voice of Monday Night Football since 86, with all three of whom had worked for CBS in the past, had been considered. Particularly in the case of Michaels, who had been briefly suspended by ABC for arranging for his daughter to be hired as a network messenger, and was in the midst of his own feud with ABC Sports president Dennis Swanson. Ultimately, not only would Michaels, whose brother David was also a producer for CBS NFL coverage, not join his brother and return to CBS, eventually signing a contract extension with ABC running through the end of 1995, but within Musburger, after briefly being the subject of rumors he would go to WGN to become the voice of the Chicago Cubs, rumors based in Musburger's strong roots in the Windy City,
Having graduated from Northwestern University in nearby Evanston, Fun Trivia and longtime co-host on the NFL Today, Irv Cross, was a classmate and graduated with them in the class of 61, as well as his having started out in the Chicago area as a sports writer for the old Chicago American newspaper before going on to work at CBS-owned station WBBM TV2 as well as WBBM AM 780. Musburger would end up joining Michaels and Donaldson at ABC, becoming the number 2 voice of ABC's college football coverage, reuniting him with former CBS colleague Dick Vermeil after signing a 6-year, $11 million deal, as well as calling college basketball alongside Jim Valvano after Jimmy V's departure amid a cloud scandal from NC State, as well as working one of the 2 Saturday wildcard playoff games that were added when the NFL expanded the playoff field to 12 teams for the 1990 season. While the Musburger versus CBS battle was going over the airwaves, CBS moved on to their next major event, the Masters Tournament, held April 5th through the 8th and culminating with British golfer Nick Faldo having to hold off American competitor and 1976 champion Raymond Floyd in a sudden death playoff to become just the 2nd golfer to win back-to-back Masters. Baseball, which for 1990 had start delayed by 1 week due to
Season of Dreams. Stadiums shrouded in silence. But if you listen closely, you'll hear echoes of the summer game. The joy of great deeds breaking winter's spell. For now it's spring, the season of renewal, the season of baseball's rebirth and its eternal symbols. The spring phenom, the rookie who may turn summer into a personal showcase. The veteran hoping to coax one more year out of aging legs. The cogitating manager with a face that holds rein. Through generations, listening to reality, we've created fantasy.
Bloxton without too big of a lead in second, but he'll be running like the wind if Thompson hits one. Ranker throws. There's a left side. I can't be in the lead. The Giants won the pennant. The Giants won the pennant. The Giants won the pennant.
Here's the pitch by Downing. Swinging. There's a drive into left center field. That ball is going to be out of here. There's a new home run champion of all time, and it's Henry Aaron. More than any other sport, baseball is built on memories. Memories handed down from fathers who saw Ted Williams play, or Joe DiMaggio. Memories from sports pages telling of Ruth and Cobb. A season of dreams. A boy unwraps his first pack of baseball cards and opens a world of wonder that will transform his life to the end of his days. Because baseball is a game without a clock, and so it is seamless, a tapestry of incident. The home run. The strikeout. The steal. Baseball is a game that enthralls us, ensuring our hopes as well as our memories, enabling us to look ahead, even as we remember over a lifetime enriched by the splendor of the past, as we approach a season of dreams. Baseball, 1990. Hello, everyone. I'm Greg Gumbel. Welcome to A Season of Dreams, our look at the 1990 baseball season as we here at CBS Sports kick off our coverage of Major League Baseball. This is the time of year when most everyone is a dreamer. Every team is a contender. Every pitcher is a 20-game winner. Every hitter is a 300-hitter. But the 1990 season promises to be a little different, simply because of the baseball lockout. And the question is, how will that lockout affect what we're...
Lockout that effectively wiped out all but the tail end of spring training was first previewed during that weekend with the special titled Seasons of Dreams, Baseball 1990, hosted by CBS baseball host Greg Gumbel, before coverage began on April 14th with Jack Buck and Tim McCarver traveling to Pittsburgh to cover the Pirates hosting the Chicago Cubs, while Dick Stockton and Jim Cott traveled to Houston to cover the Astros hosting the Los Angeles Dodgers. Incidentally, CBS didn't want to begin baseball coverage until after the end of the NBA Finals in June, before being persuaded to add 2 Saturday games in April and the last 2 Saturdays of the season, increasing the number of regular season airings from 12 to 16. For comparison, NBC's Game of the Week coverage had 27 Saturdays of coverage for its swan song season of 1989.
Here's McReynolds on deck, so Strawberry is going to have to search for something on 3-1. Breaking ball, and it's gone.
Goes Gladden. The pitch taken for a ball. The throw on a hop into center field. Newman going to third, and he gets there. Should go as a stolen base in an error.
Now the Twins have guessed right twice with Blyleven. You see Newman, just a little hesitation. And by guessing, I mean, see, he's looking straight ahead. That's a straight steal. They're trying to pick up Bert Blyleven's curveball. Anytime you can steal on a curveball, it's a much more difficult pitch for the catcher to handle, as it was for Orton. And on the overthrow, he gets into third.
Turning back to the NBA, CBS carried a single game for each of the final 4 weekends of the regular season, albeit with each week there was some temporary shuffling in the broadcast crews. On April 1st, Bill Raftery, whose on-air partner in the previous season, the aforementioned Brent Musburger, was ousted that day, replaced an ill Hugh B. Brown alongside Dick Stockton and sideline reporter Pat O'Brien in Inglewood as the Los Angeles Lakers welcomed the Utah Jazz to the Forum. The hometown Laker faithful went home happy as the Lakers proceeded to win 119-103, paced by 33 points and 13 assists by Magic Johnson. 10 assists were second only to Utah Jazz point guard John Stockton's 15, along with 25 points from point guard Byron Scott and 23 more from James Worthy. In the following week, Raftery joined James Brown as the Cleveland Cavaliers hosted the Detroit Pistons in a Midwest battle that ended with the Cavs, paced by John Hot Rod Williams' 33 points, upsetting the Pistons 100-97. UB Brown would return to the booth on April 15th, but for CBS's last 2 regular season NBA games, he will work alongside Vern Lundquist due to Dick Stockton's baseball responsibilities. That day saw the Boston Celtics host the New York Knicks, with this game seeing a new star who was beginning to emerge for the Celtics at that time in Reggie Lewis, who finished with a game-high 34 points in Boston's 101-94 victory. Finally, on April 22nd, the trio of Lundquist, again substituting for Stockton, Hubie Brown, and Pat O'Brien made their way to the city of brotherly love, Vern's first trip to Philadelphia since calling the Christmas Eve NFL game between the Eagles and Philadelphia and Phoenix Cardinals. As the Celtics faced the Atlantic Division champion Philadelphia 76ers, Boston will close out their regular season with a convincing 118-98 win over a Sixers team minus Charles Barkley, with Kevin McHale, used for much of the season as Boston's 6th man, finishing with 22 points, 9 boards, and 4 blocks.